Hi everyone, this is Meg at Chasing Retro. This is a viewer request, a tutorial or a guide or a show of how I make my fabric covered bubble mailer junk journals. This by far is the type of journal cover that I feel the least confident about, and I have made many mistakes making them over the couple of years I've been making journals. A lot of the mistakes were journals that I ended up keeping for myself because they were not good enough for selling. However, I feel like the last batch that I did of these, which I believe was the batch of teddy bear journals that I did, I feel like I might be starting to get into a good rhythm with my process. So I wanted to bring you along today and show you in piecemeal fashion how I make these bubble mailer journals. Now, the first thing that I do, and a lot of people choose to use the whole envelope, but I open my envelope up by cutting down two sides and then cutting the envelope apart. And I just use a single layer. The benefit to not doing this is you can just cut two sides and fold it over the other way, and you have a blank white surface that you can use any fabric on top of and it won't show through. The drawback to that though is it creates a very thick cover. As you can imagine, it's two layers of bubbles instead of just one. So if that's your goal, if you want something very thick and squishy in your hands, maybe don't add as many pages to compensate for that thickness, then that is totally the way you can go. But for the most part, I prefer to have just a single layer of bubble wrap on my covers. But that does have a drawback as well. Unless you have a plain bubble mailer, and a lot of you maybe you've been saving some that you've been getting Happy Mail in, or you can even buy them in the Dollar Tree, I think. Your bubble mailer will most likely have words on it, be it Walmart or Amazon or whatever. So you have to cover this up, because if you have a thin fabric, such as this peach, you will be able to see straight through it. So I'm going to show you an example of what I like to do to cover this up. If it were not plastic, you could use, say it were cardboard instead, you could use several different layers of white gesso. That is a totally fine method for covering up words and graphics on a box. However, with bubble wrap, bubble mailers that are plastic, I don't know that gesso would be the best option. I might need to research that actually, because that would be a lot easier than the solution I'm about to show you. So what I normally do, and I've already lost the piece of paper that I brought over here, I use a sheet of heavy, and when I say heavy, the thickness, the weight of the paper I use for printing, which I believe, I want to say it's 30-pound paper that I use for printing. I may be saying that completely wrong, because I know I use 110-pound cardstock. It may be a little more than that, maybe 35. I use a sheet of plain white paper, and I use Fabri-Tac, and I glue it down. Actually, I put a layer of glue stick first on the paper, and then along the edges and maybe just a few lines, I'll use Fabri-Tac. That will ensure that all of these dark words are covered up. If there's anything sticky, like sometimes the labels will leave stickiness, it eliminates that and it won't catch on your fabric, leave a weird glue spot coming through. So let me pause. I'm gonna go find the piece of paper that I had picked out for this project. I'll be right back. Okay, I found the paper. The next thing that I do need to mention is size. So I think these mailers are, I want to say they're 9 by 12 when you get them. Most of them, they have some bigger ones. Amazon has some that are bigger, but I think their standard size mailer is 9 by 12. That is a little bit too big in my opinion for a journal, just for the fact that you have to, most of your folded pages are going to fall way short of that. So I like to trim mine down to 11 by 8 1/4. That is my favorite journal size to make out of these bubble mailers. That gives you a little bit of room on the top and bottom here. After you glue this down, you'll cut that extra paper off. But it's exactly the width of a paper, obviously. It's 11 inches long. So that's what I prefer to do. That way when you fold it, it just looks like the standard size, 5.5 by, oh, that's 8, yeah, 8.25. 8.25 by 5.5. That's my favorite journal size to make when I make these soft covers. After you trim it, and I use a straight edge metal ruler, I line it up on my grid, I trim it. Sometimes I'll go back through and you'll just have these little, you know, the little pieces of glue, or the, not glue, but when they heat seal these envelopes, you may have some little pieces on the top hanging off. I just like to trim those off just because when you wrap your fabric, you don't want there to be anything sort of hampering a good crisp fold, as crisp as you can get on a very flexible bubble mailer. And you'll find, guys, if y'all are very exact and you like your corners to be perfect and your edges to be 100% perpendicular, you are not going to like this type of journal because it is very fluid, very inexact, very junk journal-esque, if you will. So this one, you just have to be a little less strict when you're making these. You just have to learn to let go a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do, the easiest way I found is to put the glue on this, not on the paper. I'm just going to put glue all over with the glue stick. We're going to have to train a fold in the paper as well. You can fold it beforehand, but I found that it's a lot easier to fold it after because you don't have to try to match up the fold line. Now I'm going to follow that up with some Fabri-Tac, mainly along the edge, but also a little bit in the middle. Fabri-Tac, as you know, is not cheap, so I use it sparingly, only when I really need it. You'll also find that on a lot of these mailers, it eats away the color of the print. So don't be alarmed if you're moving it along like this and you notice that, oh, it's taking some of the blue off. You don't really need the blue, so it doesn't matter, but it contains solvents, and that just shows you how powerful this glue is and why it's good to have good ventilation. And wash your hands when you're done using it. It'll take your breath away, for sure. I like to have, I don't have it today, but I like to have a little fan in front of me when I'm working to sort of, catty corner to me rather, to sort of blow the fumes away and back from me. All right, I need to slide it to the right a little bit. Make sure I have it. It might be easier to flip it at this point. Yep, I've got it on this side. It's a little bit, needing a little bit of sliding this way. Thankfully, Fabri-Tac has a pretty good, what's the word I'm looking for? Reputation for letting you move things around a few seconds after you place them. Otherwise, it's, you know, I probably wouldn't use it. It would make me say bad words. So here we have a very smooth, very primed surface for whatever type of fabric we have. Now, if you have a dark fabric or a heavily patterned fabric or a very, very thick fabric, you don't have to do this step. Unfortunately, these peach journals that I'm making are mainly light colors, somewhat sheer fabrics, so this is necessary in my case. I'm just trimming off some that I could not get all of that blue covered, and it might have been because I measured somewhat inexact when I was measuring and cutting my bubble mailer the first time. Again, this is very inexact, fluid type of journal cover, so you just kind of work work with what you have. The beauty about this type of journal, unlike the other fabric cover journals that I make with the muffin boxes, is they're a little bit cheaper to make. Not only are most of the time the envelopes are free, well, other than what you purchase from Amazon, you do not have to use the cotton batting, but even without that, you still have this crunchy feel. Okay, now you have a choice to make. You can make this the outside, or you can make this the outside. I need to decide which one I'd rather have. You know what? Of the two, if I'm going to hold my journal, I would rather feel the bumps on my fingers through the cloth rather than smooth. So I'm going to fold the paper so that it is in the inside versus the outside. So before we make a crease, let's make sure we have the edges completely meeting. This is going to require some finagling and some coaxing into the right position. Don't worry if the inside looks kind of bad. See how it's bumpy? This is also going to be covered with fabric. Don't worry about this at all. It's not going to be pretty in this part of the process. It's not pretty until you cover up all of that with fabric. Okay, now I'm going to let this dry a few minutes before I move on to the next part. This is the fabric that I have chosen for this journal cover. And because none of the other pattern peach fabrics that I have really look good inside with this, say I wanted to make the inside this is a completely different shade of peach. It's more orange. I will probably choose an ivory or a cream colored fabric to line the inside. We'll pick that later. First of all, I like to have the outside fabric chosen, and before I get ready to cut it to fit, I'm going to go iron out all of these creases from it being folded into a square. I'll be right back. All right, I have ironed this the best I can. It still has a little bit of lines, probably because it's been folded in a square since 1991. That's okay. It will still work out just fine. I also have found, I went digging in my fabric box again. I found this in there. This was sent to me in Happy Mail. It's a little bit different shade of peach. It's a little more pink than peach. But I think it's subtle enough that I'm going to use it as what I put on the inside. I'm going to think that through as I do the top part, but I really do think that it would make a nice interior liner. So I'll set that here. All right, the thing that I'm working with limited space here, so just bear with me as I try to lay everything out to cut. The thing that you need to do is, sorry, I'm knocking over things. You need to lay your fabric down first on your workspace, and then you're going to lay your journal open on top of it. Let's see, I may have overestimated how much fabric I need. I may be able to use this little side right here that's already cut. This is not quite enough. Do you see how there's not really a full inch around? I like to have close to an inch to wrap around. So I'm going to use this right here. I'm going to use this corner. And I'm going to use the background grid as just a general gauge. This has a pretty raw edge at the top, and I find that's more difficult for unraveling when I'm trying to fold it down and glue it. So I'll probably trim that off. But let me grab my fabric scissors, and I'm just going to lay this. This does not have to be exact. I'm going to put it where it has about an inch all the way around. Well, a little bit more up here because I'm going to trim. And I'm going to cut. I can see right now that I've got this long strip that I'm going to be able to cut off and put in my box for making clusters for these journals. So that works out well. A little offcut there. And then now I'm going to cut this way. Again, not exact. That's the beauty of this. We can fold the rest of it and put it aside. I will probably use that in some capacity for some of the others. And I'm just going to trim a few of these strings off to make it easier to fold over. Should have pulled my little trash bin closer to me. It's across the desktop. All right, now let's trim this off. This is a little crooked, isn't it? I know that's it's going to be covered up, but sometimes it bothers me, so I'm gonna make it a little more even. Okay, now let's do this side. All right, so don't go gluing anything yet. As you see here, we have a few more preparations we need to make before we get the glue out. Okay, so first we need to make sure that we have everything oriented like we're supposed to. Did I want the bubble wrap to be on the outside of the journal? Yes, I did. When I flip it to the outside, is the fabric right side out? Yes, it is. It's really hard to undo that if you don't check that first. And you're kind of working backwards here, so you kind of have to make your brain think that way. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to cut each of the 4 corners. I'm trying to decide if I want to glue it down first or not. It might make it easier to glue it down first. I kind of fluctuate on this, but because this journal is a little more fluid, to give it a little stability, I'm going to glue it down. I'm using glue stick for this part too, and this is not 100% necessary. I just like to do it to ensure that I am, you know, it doesn't shift around on me too much when I'm working. All right, so let's glue this down in the center. Be sure at this point, my fabric is not, it does not have lines, okay? It has tiny flowers that don't really have a grid pattern of any way. It's just scattered. You need to be very careful for this part, especially if you didn't cut your edges exactly straight, that when you glue it down, your stripes are vertical or horizontal, or your gingham, because gingham is a type of stripe, you don't want it to be doing like this. So go through before you glue it down and make sure that the sides of your journal are aligning with where the stripes are on your cloth. That is another tip that I learned the hard way. A lot of the things I learn from mistakes, which I think is the best way to learn. I'm going to cut off 4 triangles now. I leave about this much. Probably should have left a little bit more. I leave about, what is that, 2 millimeters or so of fabric right here. And I cut the extra triangle off and I save these for clusters and things. You're gonna do that on all 4 sides. This just helps you make a better fold. All this is geometry. See, guys, you thought that you were done with geometry when you exited high school, didn't you? You are not. Okay, now comes the messy part. You have to get out your Fabri-Tac again, and you have to need a paper towel near you, if I can find mine. Oh my goodness. It's so funny. The minute I start filming things, I lose everything. I lose my paper towels. I know I had it because I used it right before the camera turned on. Let me go get another paper towel. Found it. Okay. This is just to make sure it does not stay on my skin too long. All right, what you're going to do is, I like to start with the long ends first. I don't know why, I just feel like it's easier to fold. When I say long ends, I mean opposite ends of the long part of the book. So I guess that would be the short end. I kind of guesstimate the shape of this and how it's going to fold over, and I put some glue in that shape. I go all the way to the corner. And you don't have to put a ton, I mean, seriously, because unless you don't have a sewing machine, the next part's going to involve sewing. So you're going to secure this very well. Pull it taut along the edge of the bubble mailer and press it down. Okay. You're going to reverse the book and do the same on the other side. The process, if you'll see as I'm going along, is very similar to when you make a soft cover fabric cover journal on a box. It's very similar. The only difference is you don't have a spine to work with. A wide spine, I should say. But the steps and the process is the same. All right, now this is the part that can be a little tricky. I can't really describe how to do this part, but you're going to put some glue in this little pocket that formed, some glue on top of this little triangle, and then you're going to do the same thing you did here, the same little shape of this flap, more glue. Before you fold it down, you're going to press this triangle down and you're going to tuck it in as much as you can and then fold it over. So it will look like this. I'm showing you now before the glue. It will raise up a little bit, and that's fine. We can add glue there later. You can remember I said sewing is going to help hold that down too, but that's the order you do it. You do glue in the little pocket, glue on top of the pocket, hold it down with your pinky or maybe even a toothpick, fold it down and secure it. So we'll do that now. Glue on top, glue inside the pocket, and then all the way across. On this side, glue in the pocket, glue on top of the little triangle pocket. Okay, here we go. That's done. This side, make sure this corner is down, and then you work on pulling tight the middle and pressing it down. You will probably have some bumps and wrinkles that you have to smooth out, but if you can get those two corners down first, it makes it a lot easier. Other side, same exact thing. On top, in the pocket, and across. In the pocket, on top of the pocket, and let's get pressing. That side's down, that side's down. You have to be careful because sometimes when you try to press it down when it's started to get tacky, it will lift up on you because it will grab your finger. So roll your finger off of it. Now go wash your hands because you're going to have this and you don't want this. The next thing you're going to do before you put your layer on the inside is choose your tie closures if you're going to put tie closures on your journal. I recommend that you do on this type of journal because they tend to be very billowy and not want to stay shut. So you have a lot of different choices. Fabric strips, scrappy ties, lace, grosgrain ribbon, satin ribbon, or sari silk. This is some sari silk that I ordered off of Etsy a while back. It is a beautiful peach color, and I think I'm going to use this. This has a lot of stray threads that I'll need to trim, but it's gorgeous, and I just have to find the end. Let's see. Should have found the end before I pushed play. Here it is. Okay, so a lot of times when you buy these Sari Silk, they're just, someone has torn them into strips and then sewn them together to make one long thread. You can leave the sewing parts on there if you want to, or you can trim them off. I also have found that the length of these torn strips are about perfect for how long you need your ties to be on a journal. Sometimes a little too long, but you can trim them. So let's see how long this one will be until we get to the next sewn part. Okay, we have that much. I think we can easily cut this in half. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to cut right next to the sewing. And if we cut this in half, that provides ample amount for tying. That is about 20 inches or so. So 40 inches uncut. Let's do that. These strings. It's worse in the winter. I'll warn you guys, if you ever deal with Sari Silk in the winter when there's static in your house, oh my goodness. You'll have these strings all over you. It's bad enough when it's humid, and it's very humid in here today. It's just following me. Can you see this? It's like a spider web. Okay, finally got rid of it. So let's cut this piece in half. Right in the middle here. And you can angle it or not. Angle your cut. I usually try to, but then it doesn't really work out that well. I do like to angle my Grosgain when I do that. And if you do that, if you use Grosgain or satin ribbon, I highly recommend that you carefully, this is an adult only operation, use a lighter to barely touch the edge of the ribbon to seal it, so sort of melt the ribbon and make it not fray. You can also buy something called Fray Check, which is like a chemical solvent, not solvent, but like a chemical sealant that you can put on the edge of ribbon. I don't like that very much on ribbon though, because it tends to make the ribbon discolor or darken on the ends. So I usually prefer to use the lighter method. Okay, so here, if we sew this down, it will give us ample room for tying. I still have strings following me. The best way to do this is to flatten it out as best as you can. I've got this here to show me where the middle of my book is. And I'm going to glue it. And then we're going to put the fabric on top, and then we're going to sew it. So you'll have double protection against these being pulled out with glue and sewing. That would be about four, a little bit more than 4. Just a little dab of Fabri-Tac should do. Make it as flat as we can, so the fabric laying on top of it, we won't have too much of a obvious folded fabric underneath. Okay, that looks like it's in the middle. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay. This one's a little bit wider than the other one, but that's fine. Some people like to iron their Sari Silk. I kind of like it to stay scrunched up, but it just makes it a little harder for this part when you're trying to glue it down. All right, clean your Fabri-Tac off because it has little Sari Silk strands all over it. I bet mine does. Before this dries, fold your journal in half and make sure that the ties are equal across from each other is what I'm trying to say. And it appears as if they are. Now the next part can be cut or torn, and no pun intended, but I'm usually torn as to which one I prefer to do. I like the torn look. However, you only have one chance to get this right, especially if you have a precious piece of fabric. So a lot of times I will just cut instead of tearing for this part. And if I cut, I use my pinking shears, which you can see whoever gave me this fabric has already done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a pencil and I'm going to very carefully mark. See how I'm leaving about 1.5 millimeters all the way around? I'm going to mark where I want to cut this fabric on this side. Oh, that pencil is, it must be a drawing pencil. It is very crumbly. I did not intend for that to happen. I'll have to make sure I erase that mark. And then I want to cut this way. Okay. Move the book out of the way so I don't accidentally cut my sari silk ties. And I'm going to slide this over, so I will have, actually I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to slide this over so I will have a guide underneath that I can see as I cut. I'm going to line this little mark up, make sure the fabric is straight all the way up, and I'm going to start cutting. This part makes me so nervous, y'all. I hate it. This never gets easier for me. I'm going to cut right on the 5. You know what? Maybe I should put something there to guide me. I'm going to put it at 4.75 to guide me, so I know as long as I stay where I'm supposed to in that regard, I will be fine. You know what I'm gonna do instead of that? I'm just going as I go, guys. This is how it works. I'm getting another pencil that's not quite so dark, and I'm gonna make a line because I don't trust myself. This is on the 5, and I'm going to draw a line all the way up, and I'll just know that I need to cut right next to the line. You can do this. You can erase a pencil mark fairly easily. I didn't draw enough. You can erase a pencil line fairly easily on fabric. They do make fabric pencils. I have one, I just don't know where it is. And then we're gonna do the same thing for the line. Is this the line that I drew? I think it is. Let's line it up on the grid. And it's at 8. Okay. All right, to make sure that I have this right, because like I said, if this is a precious piece of fabric, you have one chance. I'm gonna lay it back on top of my book. And I'm looking at it to make sure it is even. It looks like it is not even. Do y'all see that? It is sort of crawling downward as it goes to the right. So I'm gonna adjust that a little bit. All right, let's start cutting. If you do cut crooked and your square is not perfectly square, a little tip for you is you can hide pretty much anything with the right kind of pocket. So on these soft cover journals, I like to do a fabric pocket, and I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. And they will hide a multitude of errors. Okay, let's see if we did this right. It appears as if we did. Breathe a sigh of relief. Oh my goodness. Okay, now before we glue this down and sew this down, we need to choose a pocket. So I'm going to get a few options and I'll be right back. Okay, as you can see, my first choice or option was to use some Kool-Aid dyed, I guess this is a form of eyelet trim that I had, and it is a little too orange, in my opinion, for the background. So I'm going to opt to use something a little more neutral, which is the same exact thing, but a very, very light cream version. I think it goes this way. I don't know. I don't think it matters. Actually, I think I'd rather the more embellished, holy part of the trim be at the top. So I'm going to just eyeball this, make sure that this end is straight. Trim the strings off, and there's really no way to keep this from unraveling. It's just a beautiful mess, if you will. Let's move this, for goodness sakes, because I will cut right through that. And then I'm just eyeballing it, and I'm going to cut right about here. Okay, I cut it a little bit crooked, so I'm going to trim just a tad. Okay. So here we have our pocket. It's a pretty wide pocket. You can put it inside the journal completely, or you can even have it peek out a little bit on the bottom if it's pretty. And that is quite nice, isn't it? I might let it peek out just a little. All right, so now we glued this one down. And the way I like to glue this one down, honestly, is only with glue stick, because I don't want any Fabri-Tac to... Fabri-Tac has a tendency to be a little shiny when it dries. Occasionally it will bleed through very thin fabric like this and leave a slightly dark color, and I don't want that. So I'm going to only use glue stick because we're going to secure everything with our sewing machine. If you don't have a sewing machine, by all means, use Fabri-Tac for this part. I'm also going to sort of glue these edges down, just for no certain reason other than I just want everything to be neat and tidy underneath this inner fabric. You can still put this glue stick on top of the fabric. You just have to be a little careful not to pull on it too much. I've got one of my long hairs there. I don't want that. Okay. This part won't lay down, will it? There we go. You can kind of use the glue stick as a mechanism to push the fabric down. Let's lay this on top. Press it. And then for this part, I am going to use a little bit of Fabri-Tac. It's thick enough that I'm not worried about it. Obviously, you only put it on the sides and across the bottom, and you don't need much because we're going to run the sewing machine. But again, first let me make sure I've got it right side. Oh, I was about to do it upside down. You need to make sure that you use Fabri-Tac more heavily if you don't have a sewing machine. I'm just using this line as a gauge to show me where to put my glue. Right. Oh, I said I was going to move it down a little bit, didn't I? There we go. Make sure this is even all the way across. and then press it down. When it folds in, if it's a thick one like this, it will sometimes bubble out, but that's okay. That really can't be helped. It will get a little bit better once we sew it, but just use that as an excuse to put even more lovely, voluptuous goodies in these interior pockets. Make sure I've got this completely even. You can also do this to make sure everything meets. Yep, that shows you that your pocket is straight. All right, next step is sewing. What we're going to do, watching very carefully where these ties are at all times, because you can very easily sew them down. You go around the outside edge of your entire journal. You can use a straight stitch, you can use a zigzag stitch. You want to be sure that you come in enough that you grab this fabric. So it's okay if you come in this case, you know, 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little more. And you want to grab the fabric, you want to grab the pocket. And as you go, you're going to make sure these are out of the way. Fold them over here. When you turn around, make sure this guy is not hiding. Pull him up and out of the way. I like to start on the back, just in case when I come back around to meet my stitching, it's not very pretty where it meets. And I also like to do a back stitch to secure the stitching. And I don't always, especially with zigzag, the zigs don't always meet the zags. So when you do a back stitch, you really don't want that part to show. So I try to start on the back of the journal. I'll start on the back like this, and I'll go around. This is the front now, and then I come back around, go past the spine, and stop here again on the back. That's my preferred method. You don't have to do that, but that just guarantees if I make a big mistake while sewing, it's probably going to be at the beginning or the end of the sewing process, and it will be hidden. Okay, you guys, it is sewn. Everything is down. Everything appears to be secure. Right here, it didn't catch both sides of that fabric, but it did catch one part of it, so that's fine with me. You're kind of going blind because you're sewing on this side. I prefer the way it looks when I sew on this side, so you're kind of having to just guesstimate where your fabric is on this side. And as you can see, I mean, I'm not the best at lining up my lines, so this is the little accident that always happens on my journals, but no worries because it's on the back and nobody will see it. Nobody will know it's there except you. So now we have a beautiful journal with a tie, secured, sewn in, and all you do now to figure out the size pages that you need, and this is the same for any journal, you're going to put a ruler. This one doesn't go all the way to the end, but you're going to say about 10 inches folded papers, and then about 8 inches tall, maybe a little less, 7 7/8. And you're going to cut your pages like that. I would say the best amount of paper for a journal like this without it becoming too much of a gator mouth would be no more than 15 folded papers. You can do less, you can do more, but it is a single signature journal. So you will only have room to sew one signature right here. And as some of you know, I don't sew my own signatures, and my husband so lovingly does that for me because I lack hand strength and it's hard for me to grip everything and not injure myself with the awl. But he has told me that these are pretty easy to do. He has a template, he folds the template that's made of cardboard and puts it here. He pokes the holes and sews them in. Sometimes when the signature is sewn in, it might be slightly off because, like I said, this is not 100% right angle. See how this part folds nicely because maybe it's between bubbles and this one is on the top of a bubble. So if you don't like the way it looks at the end, you can always wrap, after you sew the signatures in, you can always wrap a doily glue that down, or lace or some sort of trim to sort of cover up the spine if you don't like the way that looks. That is always an option for soft covered single signature journals, and well, more than single signature. That's always an option to cover up binding if you're not perfectly binding it and it's not perfectly in a straight line or whatever. So that is how I make my soft cover bubble mailer journal covers. They're crinkly, they're squishy, there's a lot of give to them, but they still have this form and structure that I love. And once it's full and laces are billowing out, it's the prettiest little thing to stand upright or to lay on a bookshelf like that. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys decide to try this, let me know. I watched so many tutorials on how to make this, and I kind of gathered bits and pieces of everybody's ideas and made it my own. So let me know what you think, and it's time to decorate this cover and start cutting pages. Talk to you next time. Bye.